Batman the Caped Crusader came out a year ago, but to me it feels way longer than that. I remember when the trailer dropped for this show and it was everywhere. Critics loved it, DC fans were excited, people were calling this show the spiritual successor to Batman the Animated Series. Alright, it has my attention. But after the show came out, almost overnight it just disappeared from conversation, and nobody was talking about it. Why is that? Well, I finally got around to watching the show for myself, and boy, I think I understand what happened here. Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, who sometimes knows more than most, Double T in the Morning, and today we are going to be diving into Batman the Caped Crusader and discussing why I think this show is an unmemorable Batman series. The Caped Crusader takes Batman back to the 1940s with a noir-inspired Gotham, and focuses on Bruce's early years as Batman. Now, Gotham's already a dark, gritty, and crime-filled city, so the noir aesthetic fits this atmosphere quite well in my opinion. Most of Batman's supporting cast returns in this series as well, with some interesting redesigns. Barbara is older and works as a lawyer, Lucius is Bruce's attorney instead of his tech guy, and Alfred is bigger and noticeably warmer than previous versions too. All of them are pretty much on par with their previous counterparts, with a few exceptions. Bullock is now a corrupt cop, and Commissioner Gordon is running for mayor, but character-wise, they haven't changed much. However, I wish I could say the same for the villains in this series. I have two problems with the Caped Crusader, and the first one being with its villains. I was not impressed by the versions of the villains we see in this series. Batman has one of the most infamous rogue galleries in all of comics. Just about all of them are easily recognizable and hard to forget. However, in this series, many of them are shadows of their former selves, and it made them all seem very one-note. For example, the Penguin we know is a social outcast in high society because of his looks. He turns to high-class crime in order to enjoy the luxuries he was denied, all the while longing to be accepted. The Penguin in this series is a woman. Okay. With two adult kids who is committing crimes just because she wants to be a crime boss in Gotham's criminal underground.
Yawn, so bored.
The Harley Quinn we know is a former therapist who turned into a self-proclaimed girlfriend of the Joker, who is sadly and delusionally in love with him, constantly begging for his attention no matter how he treats her. Harley Quinn in this series takes revenge on rich patients who confess their selfishness to her in their one-on-one therapy sessions. Plus, she's close friends with Barbara in this series. Okay. Seriously though, fuck this Harley Quinn. She was literally helping the police out in one episode, and then the very next episode she's a villain and there's like no build up as to why that is. Need I say more? There are a couple of other one-off villains in here who they do not spend a lot of time on, like Firebug, who dies in the same episode he appears in. They introduced this onomatopoeia guy, who I thought was Green Arrow's villain, by the way. And then this demon soul-sucking girl who, I've never even heard of. The only villains I felt like they did a good job on were Catwoman and Clayface, but that's only because they stayed the closest to their previous versions that we are used to seeing. They didn't change much, unlike Harley and the Penguin. Many of our classic villains seem to have lost their depth, and nowhere is that more evident than the treatment of Harvey Dent in this series. Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face, as a character is one of the more tragic villains in Batman's rogue gallery. Harvey was a hard-working, good-natured attorney general in Gotham. He genuinely wanted to make the city a better place and strived for it every day. One of his defining traits was that he could not be bought and didn't bend to the will of the mob families in Gotham. While facing all of this, he was also battling against his own inner demons as he fought to control his emotions so that he would not lash out angrily. Harvey was one of the few higher ups in Gotham that Batman respected. I want to be clear though, I am not saying that we can't have differing versions of these characters out there, but the essence of who these characters are shouldn't be lost in those changes, and that, at least to me, seems to be what's happening here. The most important thing to remember about Batman's villains are the fact that they are the victims in their own stories. Many of them are driven to crime due to their circumstances or their twisted outlooks on life. The Penguin wanted acceptance in a world that rejected his looks. Harley wanted to diagnose the most psychotic man in Gotham, only to end up falling for him. And in Harvey's case, it was that righteous nature of his that got him on the bad side of the crime bosses in Gotham, which is why they ended up putting a hit on this man and getting acid thrown in his face. In the Caped Crusader though, we do not get to know the villains Batman faces. This series doesn't really devote any time to them, so that we, the audience, can understand why they do what they do, their motivation. This is why they come off as lacking. Even Batman doesn't take an interest in his villains this time around. Now the villains may have started my disappointment with the Caped Crusader, but Batman himself is why I never became invested. Batman is my second problem with this series. This version of Batman is the most boring, by-the-numbers Batman I've ever seen. He does everything you expect Batman to do. He doesn't smile, disappears at the drop of a hat, stares condescendingly, but that's the problem. Batman is already known as a stick in the mud. He's only focused on results and doesn't always seem very sympathetic to others. However, we have gotten brief moments or episodes in the past that show us he is not as heartless as he seems. Remember how I mentioned earlier that in the animated series, Two-Face is a character that Batman respects? Well, it goes further than that. Batman considered him a good friend and supported Harvey and his efforts. When Harvey was attacked, you could see how concerned Batman was. He rushes Harvey to the hospital and is worried not only about the physical, but the mental effects that the attack will have on him. Bruce is even haunted by the fact he couldn't help him in time in his dreams.
I thought you were my friend. You should have been able to help me, but you didn't.
And I feel like that type of emotion is missing from the Caped Crusader. He does not spare much thought for anyone, let alone his villains. I can't say that this Batman didn't have any emotional moments in this season, but they all fell flat to me. I won't say he's outright bad, just nothing really stands out about him. He has no character. The voice of Batman in this series is also not helping its case. This is the first show where I've ever listened to Batman speak and thought, that's just a man in a bat costume, that's not a hero. Batman is voiced by Hamish Linklater in this series, and this seems to be Hamish's first voice acting role for an animated series, so I'm not going to blame him too much for this performance, but I am going to blame the voice direction. His Batman voice really sounds like an impression to me. If you were to tell someone, I'll give you $20 right now if you give me your best Batman impression, this is what you would hear.
Why are you trying to kill Commissioner Gordon?
Let's just compare him really quick to some of our previous Batman, shall we?
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
So this is how it ends. Not in a battle against criminals, but taken down by my own best friends.
Gotham's oldest attraction, and Halloween night, its biggest moneymaker.
No, Dent! Let's get out of here.
James Craddock.
You know me.
I know who you're pretending to be.
Trust me, he's not the only one pretending, honey. Do you see what I'm talking about? On the other hand, his Bruce Wayne voice was perfect. Linklater's voice really fit that role. His Batman voice though really bothered me as I watched the show, and at first I really could not put my finger on why. It wasn't until I watched another reviewer talk about this show that it finally clicked for me. Shout out to the Nostalgia Critic, by the way. The reason his voice bothered me is because Bruce Wayne is supposed to be the secret identity, not Batman. Let me explain. The way Batman acts when he's not in costume, the wealthy socialite playboy, the orphan billionaire, is the image he is portraying to the rest of the world. This is how the world views Bruce Wayne, who they think he grew up to be after losing his parents. Batman is who Bruce Wayne is, a cold, calculating, suspicious, lifetime loner. Batman is who that 8-year-old boy turned out to be. Linklater voices him in reverse, making Bruce Wayne the character and Batman the secret identity. Because of this, I had such a hard time taking Batman seriously, because I could feel that he was playing a role. The last thing I'm going to talk about in this show is a scene toward the end of the season that just rubbed me the wrong way. There'll be some slight spoilers for this show up ahead, so skip to this point in the video if you don't want to hear it. But there's a scene toward the end of the season where Batman is confronting this corrupt cop who tried to take out Barbara, but hits Two-Face instead because he protected her. Once Batman arrives and sees what has happened, he reaches for the gun that the cop dropped and fires it at this guy. Now, we all know Batman is extremely against guns. I mean, that's Batman 101. But I think they were trying to make this scene represent his fight against the constant crime in Gotham, and use it as a way to remind himself that he will not sink to their level. But this scene doesn't really work for me in that regard because it feels forced, especially since it seems like it's alluding to the fact that the loss of Harvey is what pushes him to reach for the gun in the first place. And I don't buy that, because in this series, Bruce and Harvey weren't really friends. I mentioned earlier how Harvey was already kind of a jerk in this series, and to Batman, he was someone he tolerated. He didn't seem to actually care about him. Even after Harvey was attacked, Batman didn't really check in with him to see how he was doing. Instead, he was trying to use him to get information about who attacked him. In fact, there's a scene where Batman goes to visit Harvey in jail and tries to convince him to use his connections to get out of there, but Harvey doesn't want to do it. And Bruce breaks character, lashing out at him, telling him now is not the time to try and grow a conscience. This is a real letdown, because in other versions of Batman, after the acid attack, Bruce generally tries to help him and support Harvey getting back on his feet, before his twisted personality proves it to be impossible. I could see that version of Batman being tempted if the opportunity presented itself, but not this one, because they were never that close to begin with. At the beginning of this video, I asked why nobody talks about the Caped Crusader anymore, and after finally watching it for myself, I think I got my answer. It's not a bad Batman series, it just never gives its characters enough depth to become memorable. And for a franchise built on one of the greatest heroes of all time, around some of the greatest villains in all of comics, who are known for their character depth, to produce something that just doesn't leave much of an impression, well, that's probably the biggest disappointment of all. Let me know down below what your thoughts were on the Caped Crusader, and if you think it does anything better than its predecessors. But I'm your host, who sometimes knows more than most, Double T in the Mornings. See you next time!